Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. Welcome, I am Summer with Summer Sweet Shop, and I'm here to talk to you guys about outlining and flooding your cookies. So if you've ever done cookies before, if you've ever watched videos before, you hear the terms outline and flood all the time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that means. Next week, we are going to talk about consistency, and we're going to talk about how you get those consistencies for outline and flood. But for today, I'm just going to tell you a brief, just little description of what outline and flood mean. So outline is the icing that we're going to use to outline our cookie, and your flood icing is what you're going to use to fill in the middle. So your outline, I've got some outline icing here in this bag, and this is like a toothpaste like consistency. And then I've got my flood icing here. You can see it's a lot more softer and not as thick, and this is like a maple syrup type of consistency. So those are the two consistencies that I like to use. I almost always use two consistencies, an outline and a flood. Very seldom if I'm just filling in a very small area, or if I'm using just a tiny bit of one color, and I don't want to make two consistencies with that, I'll use a 20-second icing, which is kind of an in between your outline and your flood icing. But probably 95% of the time, I use two consistencies, outline and flood. And that's just a personal preference. Everyone has their ways that they like to do it, but that's just what I do. So we're going to talk about how to outline and flood your cookie today. And first, you're going to start off with your outline icing. So let's talk about tips. I like to outline, again, a personal preference. I like to outline my cookies with a tip. Usually a 2.5 PME tip is what I prefer. Let me see if I can find it on here. It's super hard to see. But that says, actually this is a 2. So I either do a 2 or 2.5. I just grabbed this bag. This is some that I had left over. Your icing, my royal icing recipe will last for up to 2 weeks. You can set it on the counter. I usually just pop it in the fridge at night when I'm done using it, but I don't, it might start to separate, like this one had separated some, but all I have to do is just massage the bag and put it back together, massage those colors back together, or I can put it in a bowl and mix it up and rebag it. So a couple options. So you want to use both. Like try some tips and try it with just Tipless bags. So I have the orange here is in a Tipless bag. I'm going to show you and demonstrate how we do both. So I'm going to do my Tennessee cookies in the Tipless bag. And I'm going to do this Nancy plaque. If you don't have Nancy, you need to go find her from Kaleido. And I'm going to show you how to do it with the tip. So I like the tip because, one, I feel like I have better control over my icing with a tip. And two, I like the tip because if I want to change this out and say put a leaf tip because it's a green, I can easily take this off and put a new tip on. So this is just a coupler that it's on with. So that's what I like. So let's go ahead and outline our cookie. You're going to start, it doesn't matter really where you start, but you want to start on the cookie somewhere that's comfortable. And you're going to touch down, and then you're going to pull up from the cookie quite a bit. So you see how far I'm coming up. I'm stopping at each little indentation here. You don't have to do that. You could keep going. But if you're starting out, I would recommend that just until you get comfortable with outlining your cookie. All right, so we're just following around this little edge here. This little turntable is from LC Sweets. It's great, especially when you're doing like florals or things like this. It's great because it can just turn your cookie and you don't have to worry about touching it and messing it up. And I go right to the edge of my cookie, and that's just what I like to do. I'm going to push this up a little bit so I'm out in the comments. And I just like to do that just because I just like that look better. I don't want to see any edges. I want to go right to the edge of the cookie to make sure it looks really great. All right, now I'm going to grab my outline icing. Now you can do You can do your flood icing right away after your outline, or you can wait a little bit. It's totally up to you. A lot of times I'll just outline everything in whatever color that is. That's going to be that color, like everything that's going to be green, I would just go ahead and outline everything green and then come back and flood so it has a little time to dry. But it's totally personal preference, again, of whether you want to do that. So when I grab my flood icing, I've got my flood icing. I hold my bags kind of like so, and I'm going to start around the outside of the cookie. And I like to do that because I just want to make sure I cover everything. If I'm just covering the inside or working my way from the middle out, I'm going to have to do a lot of work with my scribe to move my icing around, and that's going to cut into my time efficiency. So I work from the outside in. So I filled it up pretty well there. Now I'm going to take my scribe. You can purchase these scribes on my website at Summer Sweet Shop. But I'm going to use my scribe just to push and move my icing around. So you see how I'm just covering up any of the holes, pushing it. And I kind of do like a circular motion for that because I don't want to disturb this outline icing. It kind of works out well that I have a different color for this outline. It's a little bit lighter green. I don't want to disturb that outside icing, that outline icing. So I'm just doing a little small circular motions to it. So you can just take your little scribe, push down into the cookie to make sure that it doesn't, that your icing just smooths out really well. You can shake it and tap it to do the same effect. So that's how you outline and flood this cookie. Now let's do one with the Tipless bags. So again here, you want to make sure when you're cutting your Tipless bags, they have just one seam. You can see the seam along here. It's kind of hard to see on the video, I know. But you're going to take it and just kind of squeeze it out here. Obviously, when it's not cut, you'll be able to do this a little easier. But you're just going to flatten that out, and then you're going to cut straight across. When you do that, it forms a circle like what a tip would be at the end. So you always want to start off a little bit smaller than what you think, because you can always take off more. You can't put it back on. You can always rebag it, but it's much easier just to cut it smaller. And when I'm piping, I like to have this seam towards the ground, like on the bottom, closest to the table of where I am. So again, just like I'm going to do the same thing, just like with my what I have with my tip, is I'm just going to start at a place, and I'm going to pull up quite a bit. So see how far I pulled up? I'm telling the icing where to go and guiding it quite ahead of where it is before it lays down. And I'm telling the icing where to go, not vice versa, and the icing going where I don't want it to go. Okay, so you'll see how I pull up, how far I pull up, and pull away from the cookie. If you're down on top of the cookie, you're going to have a squiggly line because your hand is more than likely not going to be straight. So I've outlined my cookie and I'm ready to fill it in. So same thing as before, like with the green. I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in. And again, that just helps to minimize how much that I need to use my scribe. So I grab my scribe here. And so since the Tennessee's got these little crevices, I'm just using a circular motion just to get right to the edge of that. And that's also going to help you get that puffy look that we're always wanting. That puffy look comes, I believe, in my opinion, is where the consistency of your icing. Again, we're going to talk about more about that next week on Tuesday for our Tip Tuesday. But if you have, I know that's always, always, always the biggest struggle with cookie decorating is getting that right icing. And I'm telling you, once you get that right icing consistency, you can tackle anything. So it's always a struggle. It just takes a lot of practice. But I'm going to give you some tips and tricks next week about what to do for that. But this is just our puffy icing. Once I'm done with this, like I just stick this right in front of a fan and for it to dry. But that is, what if the icing isn't sticking to the cookie while outlining? That's a great question. So a lot of times what I do, let me show you here again, just to demonstrate. Sorry, my arm. I need to put this paper towel over here and not over there, so I'm not reaching in front. Okay, so when I touch the cookie, I'm touching it, making contact, making sure that it's sticking. If I touch it and it doesn't, like this, is not touching the cookie. Can you see that? So I want to make sure I touch, when I am touching and pull up, it stays. If it is not staying and you're having some breakage, like if you're doing this and you're having some breakage with your icing, your outline, you might, your icing might be too thick. So what you can do with that is you just have to put it back into the bowl, mix a tiny bit of water with it, and try and rebag it and try again. When I get to the stopping point on the cookie and I go to keep outlining, I'm going to touch right here on the edge, and that's just to make that connection so that my icing stays. Does that make sense? And then that keeps going. So I'm always going to touch right here, right there where the icing stopped, and then keep going. That was a great question, and I love it. Okay, so hopefully that should help. So let's just fill this in one more time so we can just go over the flooding of the cookies. So a lot of times beginners, when they first start, they don't put enough icing in the beginning. You can totally overflow a cookie. I do it all the time, and there's a lot of ways to fix that. If you do. So we'll have to talk about that in a different Tip Tuesday. But you want to just move that icing around. You can always, if you're like, I need some more icing here, just give you a little bit more, and that will be so much easier. Okay, so I'm just moving that icing around, using the scribe to move it around some. And it's just moving right along here, going right into each little area. I don't want to have any of the cookies showing. So you see, like I'm kind of pushing it to the edge because I want to get that puffiness. I want to see an outline. Again, a personal preference. Some people don't want to see an outline. But I know if I push it towards that edge, it's going to diminish that little line there, and it's going to look nice and puffy and pretty. So, puffy, yes. So you can see it's got that nice puffy look, and it's going to dry. If you have any air bubbles, you can just use your scribe to pop those. You always need to move the icing around. It depends. It depends on how thick your icing is, and it depends on your shape of your cookie. If your cookie is like a sun and it's got a lot of like pointy edges, it's going to be really hard to get your icing into each of those without using a scribe. A lot of times I will use my piping bag, the edge of my piping bag, to go around as much as I can, and then come back. Usually if I have to use a scribe, I'll do like 3 to 4 cookies, and then come back and use the scribe. So, and that just, I don't usually want to do more cookies than that because my icing will start to set up, and I want to get to it before it sets up, before it starts to crust over. Again, a wonderful question to ask. So it really just depends on your icing consistency and and how fast you're moving and what your shape is like. If you're doing circles, a lot of times you don't have to do this as much because it's just one circular motion. Anything with like points and stuff like a Nancy, it's going to be harder to get. You're going to probably have to use a scribe to get to those areas. Again, it's just one of those things that just comes more with practice. Well, guys, that is our Tip Tuesday. I hope that was helpful. Again, join me next week for, we're going to talk about consistency, all about consistency, how to get it, what's the best way or the best consistency to use for your outline and flood, and I cannot wait to see you there. So have a great Tuesday, and I will see you same time, same place next week. Thanks, guys.